Oh, I thought you went home. I thought you went home. Yesterday, I don't know where the hell you were. And then she wants to go down the middle of the time. And I'm like, thanks for coming, Erin.
No, you called me. I didn't have to say it.
Of course. There's a bit of miscommunication somewhere along the line that's going to get rectified. It wasn't till it was 3 o'clock in the morning. We all could have went. Like, really.
You know what?
She was there all the time. And then Claire and I went into my room. I said, everybody come into my room. And then, but we couldn't make movies because I used to wear, so I thought maybe they'd all go down there, come back down and come in. So her and I were hanging out in my room. And she was fine.
Yeah, I have.
I'll forgive me. I don't forget. Clint has 0. He's just using it as a crutch. So he didn't even take care of me. So he can't even use an excuse. The whole wall. Don't you worry. Jesus. Oh, don't you worry.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed lunch and are ready to have a wonderful afternoon and carry on the thing. I just want to introduce and he will tell you all about himself.
Okay, thanks, Julie.
You're welcome.
Okay, they asked me to use the mic this session because they're recording this, so everything we say in this room is going to be on for posterity forever and ever. So go Brandon. What's that? Go Brandon. Go Brandon. Okay. And I see we have a few return visitors from this morning's session. So either some people really liked it, or some people are really mad at me. That's okay. So those of you who might not know who I am, it's nice to see faces I've never seen before. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction because that sort of explains what this presentation is about. I grew up in a small town, Coronation, Alberta. Some of you may have heard of it. Okay, that's where I'm from. It's a magical place. And I was one of those young people that was told I had 3 choices in life. If I wanted to make money, I was going to go work in the oil patch. If I wanted to work hard, I was going to take over the farm. But since I was smart, because I had good grades in school, I had to go off to university and do big things. And that's what I was told my entire life. I was told even if you go off to university and you do something amazing and you come home, you failed. You were supposed to stay gone if you were smart. And so I went off to university to do big things in the big city until I realized I didn't want to be in the big city. I didn't like it, and I didn't need to be there to do big things. Now, I was going to go to law school, but because I had too many ethics, I didn't go. I was going to go to law school, so I got an honors degree in philosophy before I decided I didn't want to go to law school. Then I got a teaching degree, so I became a junior high teacher, and I went back to Coronation, Alberta, where I made enough money teaching to buy more cows and horses to subsidize my ranching habit. And life was perfect. I mean, honestly, I got to work the cattle all evening, and on the weekends I got to teach all day. Life was grand. And then I looked at the 3 communities I was in: Coronation, where we ranched; Pastor, where I lived; and Bymore, where I taught. And I realized all 3 of them were shrinking and dying. Young people were leaving, everybody was leaving. There were too many vacant houses, businesses were closing on Main Street, the economy was on a downturn. So I shot my mouth off to anybody who would listen about the need for a rural community development strategy. And that's how I wound up in MLA in provincial politics a long time ago. Just for the record, if you're ever curious, if you want to get into politics, just keep talking. It's okay. And if you ever want out of politics, just keep talking. It's the best way to go. So I got into politics, and Shirley McComb was a deputy premier, and I campaigned on the need for a rural development strategy. And she said, when I first got elected in the by-election, go write one. So I traveled all over Alberta. There are 422 communities in Alberta. In the first 2 years, I went to over 200 of them. I advertised in every newspaper, I was on every radio program, and I had town halls to talk to people about what we needed to do for a rural community development strategy. And there was a report called Land of Opportunity that came out of that. In that report, there were 72 recommendations that covered health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts, culture, water, wastewater, infrastructure, housing. You name it, it was in the report. I gave it to Shirley, and she said, "This is wonderful. Go tell people about it." So I traveled all over Alberta again, telling people what they needed to do about health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts, culture, water, wastewater, infrastructure, housing. And everyone said, "This is a great report. I love this. This is..." One person walked up to me when it was first out and said, "This is like the rural Bible." And I was like, "That's right, I'm the rural Jesus Christ." And they said, "Seriously, this is amazing." And then I realized we had a problem. See, when I was a junior high teacher, I would go talk to high school students about how to be successful. And it was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Study hard, don't do drugs, marry someone nice. And pretty keen example, right? And they all looked at me like, "Yeah, I know, my mom told me that this morning." And none of them walked out changing their approach or their attitude. Nothing changed. So I changed my strategy, and instead, I walked in and had this epiphany in the classroom and thought, I said to the class, "I want you to describe to me what it would look like if you ruined your life." Now, they were high school students. And so they'd say things like, well, I'd become a drug addict. I'd fail out of school, so I couldn't get a good job. I would not marry someone nice. They came up with a whole list. I'd wind up in jail. I'd get prematurely pregnant. Whatever they came up with on the list, I put up on the board. And then I would ask them, "All right, I want you to imagine that's your goal in life. You want to fail. Any one of these ways. How would you start today? But you want to be a drug addict. How would you start today?" And they're high school students, remember? So one of them would put up their hand and say, "Hey, I'd smoke a joint after school." And 2 kids would turn red because that's what they did yesterday. Now, just before you get mad about dope, alcohol actually is more addictive and causes bigger problems, and it's the plague of our society these days, but it doesn't matter. They recognize, wait, I don't want to fail, but this would be the first step I would take. You want to wind up in jail. Somebody'd say, "Oh, well, I have a friend who stole some money from his mom's purse, and the friend would turn red instantly, like, well, yeah, I don't want to go to jail. We go through every example, and they realize they don't want to fail, but they were doing things that would lead to that path. Okay? And so I wrote it in a book. Some people think that I wrote 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. Some people think I did it to be a national bestseller, because it is in the US and Canada. It was for therapy. I was so frustrated listening to people say, yes, Doug, we're going to be successful, and then do the exact opposite of what they needed to do. Every community that has a strategic plan has in their strategic plan engaged youth. That's what it says. And I'll ask them after 4 years, what have you done? And they all look at each other like, I don't know. It's in the plan, but it doesn't tell them what to do. And I ask them, so what were you going to do about it? And they're like, well, that wasn't my responsibility, that was somebody else's. And you gather everyone who wrote the strategic plan into a room, and they all get together and go, me, I thought you were doing it. And nothing changes. And not only that, but I go to communities all the time that want to keep their youth or attract new young people. And the first thing I hear them say is, I don't know if we have any hope in this community. I don't know if we're going to be successful. Our businesses are closing, the housing is crappy, and there's too much of it available, and there's no jobs. And any young people need to go to the city. That's where the opportunities are. And then they wonder why young people leave, when they're sitting in the chairs right beside them when they say that. So we want success, but we do the opposite. Now, that's all based on the lies we tell ourselves. We always think we know what reality is, but we all lie to ourselves. In fact, there's some statistics. I didn't do this in the morning session, but there's some statistics. I don't remember, I'm getting ballparks here, but if I recall correctly, in the last surveys that were done all around North America, about 80% of people believe they were better than average looking. That's a pretty high percentage. 72% thought they were better drivers, 84% thought they were better parents, like 60-some% thought they were better in bed. We can't all be above average, otherwise excuse the average. But we often tell ourselves lies. And I have heard people say, I'm brilliant, I know what's going on. The world just doesn't understand me. Which do you think is more likely? That the world doesn't understand you, or maybe you're not as brilliant as the lie you're telling yourself? And so we all tell ourselves lies, and the thing that holds us back is the adherence to those lies that aren't true anymore, but we desperately want to believe them. We enforce them on the world around us to make it make sense. So, I called a whole bunch of my friends from the Ag Societies, because I know so many of them I've met over the years. Just for the record, in case you didn't know, I resigned from politics in 2015. I've been through rehab, but fully recovered. So, just I don't want anything to hold on to that like damn politics. No, I've recovered. So I called a bunch of my Ag Society friends and had many, many conversations to compile a list of the 13 lies Ag Societies tell themselves. Now, this is bound to make some of you mad. And that's okay. That whole saying, the truth will set you free, they forget the first part, or the second part. The truth will set you free. First, it will piss you off, but then it will set you free. The only way you change your perspective and realize the lies you're telling yourself is if you're really challenged, and so that's what this is for. I know it's a slightly different title than they put on the program. We'll get to some of that when we have the conversation after. Okay, the lies we tell ourselves. Number one. We were just working a second. Electronics work. Number one, we're successful. Everyone always says they're successful, except when I was doing the interviews with people from the Ag Societies, I heard them say, I asked, how are things going? And they would say, oh, we're successful, things are good. And then I'd say, what kind of challenges are you facing? And they would say things like, we don't have enough volunteers. We're having trouble raising enough funds to keep our enterprise going. We can't afford the maintenance and the power bills on the building anymore. They went through all sorts of stuff that sounded like they were really afraid about their future, when they had just finished saying they were successful. We hate to admit when we're about to do something wrong, when we're not as successful as we think we are, and yet this is a lie. And this is also the height of complacency. Because if you think you're successful, you don't have to do anything different, do you? The moment you think, hey, we're good, is the moment you stop challenging yourself to try and be better. Lie number one. Number two, we are diverse. Sorry, just looking around the room. There isn't a lot of diversity in Ag Society. Now, I've heard people say, no, we're diverse. We have people from different backgrounds. We have cattle people and horse people. And no, that's not diversity. Diversity is incredibly important if your organization is going to be successful. Not just people with different backgrounds and walks of life and cultures and languages, but even young people. There aren't as many young people at this convention as there should be. And you know what? I have done my 13 Ways to Kill a Community multiple times for you guys at your conference like this as a keynote. And every single time people come up to me and say, Doug, I love that presentation. That's fantastic. You hit the nail on the head. Boy, I'm glad we don't do that. And then a bunch of young people come up to me after and say, those people that just said they loved your presentation are the exact people who won't let our ideas through. We come up with new stuff, we have new proposals and new ideas, and all they do is shut us out unless we talk like them and think like them and want to carry on the exact same thing they've been doing for the last 40 years. Diversity is important. In fact, the Institute of Corporate Directors, I don't know if you're familiar with it, if you want to be on a board of directors, you can get certification from them. And you get credentials, you get ICD after your name. It's a pretty cool organization that gives you training. It's like a mini MBA for a few days, and you keep your training upgraded. They came and did a presentation when I finished my MBA, and they talked about diversity. They said that they did a study to see what made Canadian companies successful and why they failed, and they looked at the boards of directors. And boards of directors that had homogeneous groups, and there was a typical group I'll talk about in a minute, a homogeneous group made quick decisions, easy decisions, but they were the least successful Canadian companies. But companies that had diverse boards of directors, people with different backgrounds, languages, cultures, experiences, ages, educations, walks of life, made better decisions, and those companies were more profitable than the others. They said the conversations were harder because they were very different people that challenged each other, but they made better decisions in the end. The other companies had easy decisions to make. And you know why they had easy decisions to make? Right. I am the first guy to admit that a long time ago, I used to stand up and say, I don't like reverse discrimination. I don't want people appointed because of their backgrounds. I want the best trained people to do that job. You know who the best trained people were? 55-year-old white males with an MBA. And you know how many opinions you get when you put 10 55-year-old white males with an MBA in a room? One. Same background, same education, same experience, same perspective. You don't get diversity. Success in any organization, proven time and time again, comes with having diversity on the board and diversity in your membership. But hey, keep telling yourself you're diverse because you've got one or two things different. Lie to yourself about that that's what you have, and then you're going to be successful. Number 3, we should not make money. We're not for profit. Honestly, I hear this all the time. We shouldn't make money, we're not for profit. The only difference between a traditional business and a not-for-profit is that you don't pay dividends to shareholders in a not-for-profit. There is nothing that says you can't make lots of money and put it aside to ensure you have sustainability, to ensure you have diversity, to ensure that you're doing different projects so you can add new services, new cultural experiences, new agricultural initiatives, new community initiatives to your program. If you actually sit around and think, no, we're not supposed to make money, we're just going to break even, you are going to constantly run just above the break-even mark. And one of these days, you won't make it above the break-even mark, and then you're broke. You've got to get over this mindset that we're not supposed to make money. Make money, just don't pay dividends. Your community needs you to do that. Number 4, we are sustainable. I hear that from people all the time. Well, you know what, our focus is that we're not supposed to make money, we're supposed to be sustainable. What does that mean? That you can carry on and not fumble, not fall apart? Most organizations now, most community organizations in many communities are not sustainable at all.
Sorry, I had one point I wanted to mention I missed last time.
Oh, yeah. And now consider this. With sustainability, I bet 90% of your organizations will go broke if you didn't get your government grant. And so how sustainable is that? It's not sustainable at all because you're relying on a government that may or may not have money to supply you and support you. It happens constantly. I was the Minister of Municipal Affairs, worked with municipalities, lectured them all the time. Well, it was kind advice, and sometimes I got a little ornery, but it turned into a lecture. But I told them all the time, you won't always have a Minister of Municipal Affairs that values rural municipalities and wants to keep you going. Someday, some government or some new minister is going to come along and rip it all away. And what are you going to do? How are you going to be sustainable when you lose that funding? Because my calculation was that if the province of Alberta stopped funding municipalities, providing them the support, 112 of them would be broke the next day. And they said, thank you, but we're sustainable. We need to stay in this and not change what we're doing. And yet, here we are. We thought it was the New Democrats that were going to ruin municipalities. The current government's doing a pretty good job, too, of downloading costs and downloading more expenses and telling them what they're going to do. And now they're realizing we need to do something different. We need to collaborate and cooperate, which I'll talk about more. So ask yourself, are you really sustainable, or are you just relying on the good graces of government to hope that that funding will always be there? And I always have someone look at me when I talk about this and say, you don't understand, Doug. We deserve it. Line number 5. We deserve support. I don't care if you deserve it or not. I think you guys do an amazing job. You have to change a few things, and you could do a little more community building, which is another one down the road. But I think you do good work. No one is calling into question whether or not you deserve it. The question is whether or not the government will give it to you. And there are constant circumstances changing. I mean, finally, we're back into a break-even point with the provincial budget. But another year of this or another downturn, and they'll be pulling funding from all over the place. And you may be the most wonderful organization on God's little green earth. But if they don't have the money and they pull it, you can die being wonderful, or you can decide that this isn't about whether or not you deserve it, and work on making sure you're more sustainable. Number 6, we don't need to change. I can't believe how many organizations say this. We don't need to change. Why don't you need to change? Absolutely everything on earth is changing around you. This pandemic taught us how to do online education. I know it's not perfect. Online healthcare. I know it's not perfect. Online economy. I know it's not perfect. But every single thing in our world is changing. Everything. Why don't you have to change? Why don't you have to adapt? And if you need to realize that this isn't about you. Think about how agriculture is changing. I'm going to talk about more of this tonight, but think about how agriculture is changing. We've got vertical agriculture, we've got hydroponics, agropharmaceuticals. We've got so many different types of agriculture, so many different dimensions that agriculture is changing, and that means your organizations have to change to help celebrate and share that with the rest of the world. I actually have a few farmer friends of mine that when I talk about agriculture and change, they go, we don't have to change. Hey, in this province, we do wheat and barley and canola and beef. So, what the hell? I'm like, that'll be great. 1.3 billion Chinese don't trust their own food supply chain and want food from us. But as long as they eat beef, that's good. I mean, the world's changing and creating new opportunities you need to take advantage of. But if you keep telling yourself you don't need to change, you'll fail. Number 7, we are inspiring. I did have a couple of the people I interviewed that said, yeah, but Doug, we're inspiring. So I asked them what that means. And they said, well, we help rally the community together. We help pull people together. We make people want to work with us and join. Like, how can you say that when you just finished telling me how hard it is to get new volunteers, how hard it is to fundraise, how hard it is to get people engaged? And they say, well, it's not our fault. We're still inspiring, but those young people don't like to do things the way we do. Yeah, I know, just like you didn't like to do things the way your parents did. Your problem is that you're not inspiring except to the age bracket you're trying to inspire. And they said, well, I don't understand. What does that mean? Here, our generation, my parents' generation, went through the same process. We decided we were going to go to school and get a good job. So we went to school, we got our good job, we worked for 50 years, we retired, they gave us a gold watch, and we went off and died. Yay. That was the routine. But these younger people, Generation Z, millennials, they went off to university and they graduated, and then they went to get a job and they were told, I'm sorry, you're not even properly trained or educated for this job. You're using textbooks and equipment and computer programs that are 8 and 10 years old. I'm going to have to train you anyway. And by the way, there is no job for the rest of your life. We have a gig economy now. You know what a gig economy is? That's when you get a contract to work on one project, because companies are trying to manage their overhead and you got to be flexible. So they're used to working in a gig economy. They get hired to work on a project with a contract with 4 or 5 other people. They work on the project, they complete it, they disband, they go find another gig. And because of that, they like the gig economy now. It's built into their nature. They don't just work in a gig economy though. They gig live. They have gig lives. They have gig relationships. They gig volunteer. They're not used to being tied down to one place. Because they have that freedom, yeah, it's scary to go from contract to contract, but they can't go back. I work in a gig environment. Right? I go from gig to gig, working on contract to contract. I would not be a good person to hire full-time for a company because I'm too used to my own independence. And that's the way they are now too. They're used to their own independence. Which also means because they're in a flat environment, the gig environment, they don't care about titles. They don't care if you're the mayor or the CAO or the president of the United States. They're like, I don't care. We work in flat environments where your ideas are more important than your title. And that's a whole shift. And so now imagine extending all of that to volunteering. Do you really think they want to join always the Ag Society or the Elks or any other community organization and excuse me, commit to showing up at the third Thursday of every month for a meeting and drink a few beers? And they're not into that sort of lifetime commitment to one organization. But you give them a cause and they'll join. A purpose, a thing to do. One of my favorite examples was from a young guy. He was in the US. In a smaller community, he saw the playground, the park needed to be cleaned up. So he said, I'm going to go clean it up. He went in to tell the town. He said, I'm going to go clean it up. And they said, well, that's great. You know what? We should get you some garbage bags. And we better get a budget for that. And you know what? You'll probably have some other people there. We should let other people help if they want to. So give us time to do a marketing campaign so we can get people out. And you know what? We actually should get a budget to pay for all the bags, and maybe we could put on a little event and make it a community event. And we got to check our insurance, because if you fall and hurt your leg or bang your head, we're liable. So give us 6 or 8 months and we'll figure it out. And he said, thank you, and went out and cleaned the park that weekend. He's like, I don't care what you guys are doing. He just went and did it. He took a few of his friends, went on Instagram, took pictures of the park before, pictures of the garbage bags, and pictures of the park after, and with a hashtag, I think it was Clean My Community or Clean Up My Community. Thousands of young people across the United States and Canada followed that hashtag and went cleaned up their park. You see how they don't give a damn what your title is, and they don't necessarily want to volunteer the way you did? But we look at them and go, they don't want to join the Ag Society, they don't want to join the Elks, they don't want to sign up to the Rotary, so they don't care about community building. Bullshit. They don't care about doing it the way you did it. That doesn't mean they don't want to do it. So tell yourself, you're inspiring. If they're not coming along and they don't have the ways to be inspired that they like, then you're not inspiring. It's a lie. Number 8, owning our building is the most important. Wow. Think about how Ag Societies first started. How many of them owned a building? None of them. The building wasn't the most important part. Celebrating agriculture and community building, connecting people, that's what Ag Societies was about. In fact, your mantra says it's about celebrating and promoting agriculture and building communities. I don't see anything in any of it that talks about that you have to own a building. But what did we do? We all had to have that capital cost to build the building, and now we have endless dollars of maintenance, endless dollars of rebuilding, endless dollars of expansion with less volunteers, power rates we can't afford anymore. And what do? We make everything about the building. Everything about the building. And now we're stuck, beholden to this building. That is the sunk cost fallacy. Do you know what the sunk cost fallacy is? You put a little bit of resources in, and then you always have to do that. There was a community that we were working in Manitoba, and the council was going through their priorities for their strategic plan. And one of them said we should finish the curling rink. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you had a half-built curling rink. What have you got? He said, we spent $25,000 to put the pilings in the ground. And I said, okay, how much is the curling rink? $2.4 million. And all the other counselors said, we talked to the curling club, they can't afford the maintenance, they don't want the building. And he said, but we need to finish it. Does that sound intelligent? Because you spend $30,000 or $25,000 on pilings, you have to spend another $2.5 million on a building, except we get stuck in that sunk cost fallacy, doing what we've always done, maintaining what we've always had, because we're not thinking about where the future is. So, the lie you tell yourself is that the building is the most important thing, rather than the celebration and promotion of agriculture and community building. Number 9, you know who you are and why you are. I didn't have these as 2 separate ones, but I had like 24 different ones to put together, so I put these ones together because they are related. We always think we know who we really are and why we're here, except do we really? Oftentimes, we build in a legacy, what someone else did for us. And think, agriculture, you're on your 75th anniversary now. Ag societies have a legacy. I've had many people I interviewed from ag societies tell me this means that we live off the legacy instead of building a new one. You ask people who they are in ag societies or what their organization's for, why they're there, it's a legacy. They talk about what they've done for the last 20 years, not what they're going to do for the next 20. It's about identifying who you really are. And I'll tell you, my favorite example of this, when I first got elected as an MLA, one other MLA that had been there a long time called me into his office and said, here's a tip, Doug. I don't know how long you're going to do this for, but when make sure you know what you're going to do after this. Otherwise, that's all you've done. And so I went in community building, I focused on community building, and I left on purpose to go community building. Do you know how many MLAs I know that have no identity anymore except they used to be an MLA? They hold on to that story because there's no next chapter. And a lot of our ag societies aren't knowing who they are or why they're here. They know why they were here and who they were, but not who they are now. And it is really hard to let go. I mean, it's kind of sad seeing them. Bruce Springsteen wrote a song called Glory Days about it, right? I mean, you guys might not realize this, but when you're an MLA, you go to an event, there's 500 people there, and they have a chair for you with your name on it, and they sit you down, and sometimes you even give the keynote speech. And the moment you're on an MLA, your phone stops ringing, and they put you at the back of the room, and you have to fend for a chair like everybody else. And it's hard on the ego, which is why I was very careful to make sure that I had a life beyond being in politics. Oh, life was better beyond politics. Life is better beyond politics. So much better. That's what I mean. I went through rehab. Not going back. Number 10, we can't change or we will die. Again, talking to so many of the folks in the ag societies, a lot of them said, you know what the part of the challenge with the mindset is? Is that it's fear. They see shrinking volunteers, a shrinking base to raise funds from, find it more and more challenging to manage their system. And so when you start talking about what they need to do next, they're like, we're just holding on. We're just holding on. We don't have time to change. Except, who changes things when they're successful? No one changes things when they're successful. If you're making lots of money and you love your job and you're happy, why would you ever say, well, I think it's time to do something different? Just saying. No one does. And when you're down on your luck, when you're facing challenges, that is the only time to change. That is the best time to change. It's scary, but it's the best time to do it. And this is because of our assessment of risk. You can ask anybody, when you do something different, what they're afraid of. And they'll tell you about the change that you're doing and the risk associated. What if it fails? What if we go broke? What if we chase away our last people? What if no one turns out? All the risks of doing something. Ask them if they've considered the risks of doing nothing. Because doing nothing seems incredibly safe. It's good, we're fine. Except when you do nothing, your volunteers continue to dwindle, your resources continue to dwindle, it gets harder and harder every year to keep your program running. We all assess risk of doing something, but never of doing nothing. And that's the biggest risk. So you can say, we can't change or we'll die. More likely, if you don't change, you'll die. Number 11, we're doing all we can. I hear that all the time. I hear that from my students, I hear that from friends. I'm doing everything I can. when I ask them questions, it turns out they're not doing everything they can. They're doing everything they want to, and nothing more. I watched my son. This is where I discovered this one. I watched my son when he was like 7 years old. I was teaching him how to make the bed. And he found it very frustrating. I mean, he's little. I could reach way over to the other side of the bed and fix it. He had to climb. And I watched him. I said, I'm going to teach you how to do this. So he'd pull one corner, and I watched him. He'd get frustrated, and he'd go over and he'd pull the other corner too hard, and he deliberately set it up so he couldn't make the bed. He set himself up for failure because he believed he couldn't do it. He was doing everything he can, and it would never work. Fantastic way to fail. But hold on to that lie if you want to stay down that road. Number 12, we're community builders. I bet that one hurts. Okay? You guys all think you're community builders? Are you? When I interviewed people, I heard way too many people that didn't describe community building to me. They described a private club. That's what it sounded like. Wait, we only do agriculture. We only do a particular type of agriculture. We only associate with people who wear rubber boots or cowboy hats. It was incredibly exclusive. And they would actually compete with other organizations in the community to be successful. They would actually say, no, we're not community builders. We can't welcome everybody here. And yet, you have to work with other organizations in your municipality if you're going to be successful. You have to. Rural cooperation, collaboration between municipalities. I have always advocated for that. Now, when I was a minister, I worked with municipalities and I would encourage them to find ways to work together to be more successful. Be full community builders. And I would hear them say, no, we can't do that. We're not working together. They were in isolation, like a silo, and they had to hold on to it themselves. That was it. And it was so frustrating to hear because if you'd watch these communities and they would all have someone that did payroll and worked 60% of the time, got paid 100%. A CAO that worked 100% or 60% of the time got paid 100%. An economic development officer making $30,000 or $40,000 a year. In most communities, the economic development officer is probably the only person you can find that's unemployed because no one's moving to the community for $40,000 a year. So you find the unemployed person, you give them the job, and then you give them a cubicle in the town office and you say get to work, and they have no money to go get businesses, maybe a little bit to do a brochure that sits in the town office. So all you need is random people to show up to get the brochure. None of that was successful. None of that was economic development. None of that was going to work. They were spending money on stuff, holding on to their own enterprise in their municipality and refusing to work together, and it was leading to them to fail because none of them could go get new businesses, go get new families, go tell people what they were doing. Not one of them had money for that. And yet they refused to work together. And if they did partner and found some shared resources, they could really work on growing the municipality, attracting families. You guys are the same way. Everyone is trying to do something, and you're all duplicating so much work, and yet you say I'm community building. No, you're ag society building. It's a club. And if you don't work with your neighboring municipalities, your local municipalities, and your other service organizations, you're really just seeing who's going to die last. And that is not a successful strategy. If you really want to build community, you have to work on things beyond your boundaries, beyond your limitations, and beyond your mandate. You need partnerships, shared responsibility. And lastly, we are right. Oh, I hear this all the time. This is the world we live in right now. This is the state of politics. This is the state of community building. This is where I'm right and everyone else is wrong. If you're not on my side, you're wrong. If you're not a conservative, then you're the enemy. If you're not a socialist, then you're the enemy. Center, that's just the people who haven't made up their minds yet. And we've got politics tearing us apart all across the world because I'm right and everyone else is wrong. And you know what you wind up dead. You wind up ruined because you're not always right. And the very notion that you're right precludes the fact that you're able to learn. Right? If you admit, I might not be right, now you're listening. Now you're having a conversation. Now you can talk about the future. But the second you're sitting there saying, I am right and they're wrong, the conversation's over. What's the point? Because you're not always right. But we get stuck in that mindset everywhere we go. The kids that I taught would say, I'm right. My dad told me. Something like that. And the second they said it, they're not listening and they're not learning. And it applies to all of us. But we've got so angry these days and so polarized that it's impacting community building, which isn't right, it isn't left, it isn't political, it's just what we did when we first arrived here. And so, if you want to be right, your organization will perish. But if you admit you can be wrong and that it's time to work together, you can finally build a legacy, just like every other member for the last 75 years and 100 years, 110 years in some of your organizations did. They worked hard to build a legacy that you are living on. Your job is to build a legacy for the next generation to live on. But you can be right, you'll be wrong, but you can be right. And now we're going to have a conversation about them all. And I'm starting, I think I did last time, with, what do you think about this? How does it make you feel?
Very interesting.
I like the different perspective you made. You brought you outside the box and you didn't think you would.
Thanks. That's the idea, because I can stand up here, and I thought about doing that, and telling you what you need to do to bridge the urban-rural divide, to build better communities, and everyone would go, yeah, I know. My mom told me that last week. We know what we're supposed to do. And the problem is, we have these lies built into us that tell us how we're supposed to be doing things, and they are undermining our success. We all have them. Hell, my wife pointed 3 out to me last week. I know I do them too. The key is not that to make you feel guilty. The key is to help you change. Yes?
So how do we bring the stubborn along with us?
Exactly.
What's that?
Are you one of the stubborn?
No,
Okay, well, you raised your hand.
yeah, no, in the ag society that I'm involved with, everybody's been doing the exact same thing since the 70s. Everybody says, we've been doing this since the 70s. We're not making any changes. You don't understand. You're not from here, blah, blah, blah. And instead of going in and saying, I'm right, and this is what we need to do to move forward, I just volunteered and I started being the change. I started being the guy that would make the changes and show them that it did work and admit when I was wrong and able to move forward. And now we've taken a group of people that haven't changed really anything since the 70s, and we're one of the more progressive groups in our area.
That is great advice. It does take time because there are resistors. Well, NIMBYs, NOPEs, bananas, cave people, and fears. It's 5 different groups. Do you guys know the groups?
Yeah.
Not in my backyard, not on
That's Nova
planet.
Scotia.
Yeah, not in my backyard, not on planet Earth. Bananas means build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Bananas. Cave people is citizens against virtually everything. And the fears are fire up everyone against reasonable solutions. So they all are different, and they all have different approaches. They have different issues that hold them back. So my advice is always to start with a beer and burgers. Our tendency is to show up and tell people what we need to say, but you got to think about what they need to hear too. You got to think about how they listen to it, how they're responding to it, what you're telling them. I mean, you can say, we need to do something different in order to be successful. And what they're hearing is, you're old and your way sucks. So instead, I like beer and burgers to build some relationships and get to know each other and find out what issues they have. What are they afraid of? You know, one time over a beer and burger, you will hear them say, I'm really worried because our volunteer base is shrinking. And you can say, yeah, we need to do something about that. Do you have some ideas? Well, they'll talk for a bit, then you plant a seed. It takes time, and my advice is that when we approach it, like we lecture them, like we got to do things different, that they get defensive. Our evidence in the world today is that when you challenge somebody that hard, and it's shown psychologically, even when they realize they're wrong, if you challenge them and don't give them a way out, they'll double down on their wrong idea even when they know it's wrong. They will say, well, I'm not losing to you, and they'll double down. And then bang, you've got 2 heads bunting and arguing. You have to give people a way out. So it takes time to build that relationship. And I mean, I learned that from my wife. She has planted ideas in my head until I come around and I suggest it. She's like, I think that's a great idea. And I'm like, hey, I got a good one. That's awesome, right? So give them a way out, and they've even come around to owning that idea. And if there's still resistors and say nothing positive, go find the ones that can be positive, right? I mean, our strategy with communications and communities, and I know this probably sounds a little bit harsh, and I use this terminology before the pandemic, there are some people in a community or in an organization that will just relentlessly be negative and they will never listen to anything else. Your job is not necessarily to change their minds, because it won't change. But you can inoculate the people around them against that negativity they keep infecting, that planting the seeds of doubt. That's how they get power. They're like, well, I don't know what they did with that money. I don't know if those volunteers all came. You know, they just plant a little seed of doubt. And then everyone else goes, yeah, what the hell? What's this leadership doing? You got to be there first and plant some positive messages, and it inoculates them against. That way when they come and say, well, I wonder what they're doing with that money. They're like, oh, I saw it. It was actually published in the paper. They said what they were doing with the money, and it was really good. I took my kids there. They really enjoyed it. Boom. Inoculation. Just a few pieces of advice. Yeah.
The one out of the 13 that really rang for me was we can't change or we die. I used to work with a man named Ronnie Swearingen, who's a top alcohol, top fuel tool in the States. And we'd be on a massive winning streak. And we'd take a step back and we'd blow 2 or 3 races in a row trying something new. Because like he said, if we don't take a step back, we're far enough ahead in points, we're not going to lose. But if we don't take a step back now and try and reinvent what we're doing, these guys are going to catch us.
Yeah. There's an actual principle in business about that. You invent a new product and it grows and it becomes most profitable, but if you're not turning those profits into the next product, then it dies off really quick and suddenly you're stuck. You need to be working on that next thing and innovating all the time. It's why I keep telling people, Apple's going to wind up in trouble one of these days, because the last time they came up with something innovative was like 12 years ago with the first iPhone. But they still have a brand for it, they're just not doing it, and one day it'll catch up.
Didn't Tiger Woods do that as well? He was at the top of his game and then he took a step back, realizing that they couldn't continue to swing the way he did it, reinvented himself.
Yeah, he reinvented himself. He had some other personal issues in there. Yeah, but you're right. He actually he went back and did some training, and he found out his swing had devolved over time, so it was actually impacting his game negatively. And they from what I've read, they actually think he'll be on top again before too long, because it's improving with the right form again.
I think the big thing was when his wife hit him with the driver.
Yeah, good off the equipment.
What about, so you bring innovative ideas and they get voted in and they end up being successful, and you have yet the person that is still mad because it was almost successful. At the beginning, he's like, I'm not going to sell a ticket for you. I'm like, well, I didn't need it. It was a raffle. I don't need you to sell a ticket. Like, I know that I can achieve this goal because that's the person I am. I don't jump into something I don't think I can attain. I always stretch it. And then they just, how do you spin something like that to, like, you want to develop a relationship, but yet it's, is it worthy to even develop that relationship?
Yeah,
Spin
well,
that.
I think the second part, is it worthy to develop that relationship? There's a point where you have to say, you know, is this worth the time investment? And
because it was successful. I should be happy, but yet he's I want to use different words, but I don't want to use they're shitting on my parade, right?
Yeah.
Instead of being happy. And you know what I mean? And like, yes, maybe we pulled together a fair in 3 days. And yes, it was only $5 grand of cash that I created in a raffle I created in 1 month. But it was $5 grand that we didn't have a month ago. Like, to me, it was in a month that's pretty successful to sell 500 tickets, but yet it was a very negative, angry spin to it. But, so that's why I'm like, so keeping this like mentality, I don't know how to spin that. Like, sometimes is it working?
well, my advice is, don't go making enemies where you don't need them. But don't go making friends where they're not valued. So, just remember, a statue has
Is that
never
good?
been erected for a critic.
I don't care what the situation, I think every group's gonna have their different packages of people that are focused on different priorities, but just keeping focused on.
There could be, so I would ask, and so look, we do this all the time. I actually think they should teach psychology in school from kindergarten on because
Yes.
it's everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to know what I do for a living? I'm a hairstylist.
One of the cheapest therapists you can get in the world, yeah.
Yeah.
So so when we go in and do strategic planning or do community assessments, we interview one-on-one hundreds of people to get an assessment of where the community's at, who its mavens are that help spread positive message, and who the critics are that spread negative messages, and why. So I would sit down and talk to them. I don't mean you, maybe somebody else does it, because you got to find out, is his issue with you? Is his issue with the fact that it's something different? Is his issue with the fact that nobody asked him to participate? Is his issue with the fact that he doesn't like change? Like, there could be a million different nuances in there. And once you find that out, that's the antidote to the negativity, the criticism. You know, if his issue is with you, let him be friends with somebody else and get involved and just avoid it. If his issue is that no one asked him to get involved, somebody else can ask him and say, hey, I need your ideas, I need your help. Like, no. But once you figure it out, you know the antidote to that criticism. But it's really hard, unless you focus, to spend the time to figure that out. Yes.
This is in the past. A lot of times when I listen to the conversation, it's your way, I think, or it's my way. But what about the middle? So let's just say, for a quick example, those items up there are things that a certain number of people, let's say 50 people, put together ideas of what they want to do in a community or in the ag or a business to say, what do we do to generate income? So there's those items up there that was agreed upon with the group. So somebody says, okay, number one, we're going to do number one first. I say, no, everybody gets a vote. It's like a secret ballot.
Yeah.
Put it on a piece of paper, they stick them up there. We count. Oh, okay, there's 12 of number ones, there's 5 of number 8s, and there's 3 of number 6s, and there's 2, 2, 2, 2. So we take these in priority, one bit going. These still stay on the board, because that person, if it was me that said that, I still believe that's a good idea. Not saying it's bad or good, but I think it should be recognized. Because then I know that I'm gonna support the number 1 that the group said, and the number 2. But sooner or later, we're going to vote on the line on the bottom to bring them up top. So you get that involvement, even though you aren't first.
Brilliant. We actually do volunteer summits in communities. The last one we did was in Colorado. And so we brought both of their county and their 2 towns together, the college that's in town, and all the volunteer organizations. There were 37 different organizations together, and they all had some kind of strategic plan and priorities. So we put them all up on the board, and then we asked them to take their hats off, right? It's not about your organization. You want the community to be successful. What has to come first? What's available? And they actually volunteered that, wait, better I'm number 5 when we get those 4 things done, because then it'll be more effective for my 5, and I'm going to get help. It's kind of, you know, in towns where they want to do a Main Street project and they want to beautify and plant new trees and new lights, and they do it this year, and then next year they get to rip it up and replace the water and sewer. It's like, what? Put it in the right freaking order. It's crazy. And so that's what it is. And pulling that stuff together, that's a great strategy. Yeah. Yes.
So I'm from an ag society where we've overcome a lot of these challenges and roadblocks, and have a board, I think, that is self-aware enough to recognize where some of our challenges still remain. But how do you take that insight and affect change? And what's the process to identifying this stuff and then being able to use it to make real change, to draw, particularly, I guess, to draw, new people and volunteers?
So it's not a magical process. Someone asked me this in the earlier session too, about how you get people involved and where you start. Because I'm big on community building, so I think the volunteer organizations, the Ag Society, the town, the Economic Development, the Chamber of Commerce, you guys need to build a whole community and none of you are going to be successful if the whole community doesn't grow by attracting new people, raising the volunteer base, welcoming outsiders, all of those things I wrote about in 13 ways. And they're like, well, how do you do that with so many different organizations in every community? Start with one. Every community says, Doug, we want to attract 100 people to our community and 10 new businesses. How do we do that? I'm like, hey, well, tell me what the first one looks like. I don't know. Well, how are you going to attract 100 people if you don't know where you're going to get the first one? Just pick one and focus on that. So with all those different organizations, just pick one to start to find common ground with. Just pick one person to meet at the pancake breakfast and help them get more involved. You don't have to get 100, just one. And start there, and keep in mind all the time that what you're doing is building a bandwagon effect. A little momentum, and people like to be part of a successful story. Trust me, they also like to be part of crazy, which is how, stuff like the Capitol riot happens. They get on all sorts of bandwagons, make it a good one, and bring them along. Sorry if any of you like the Capitol riots, then not apologizing for that. But start with one, and that's the only way to do it. You need 3 new volunteers, find one. And if they really like it, they'll tell 2 friends and they'll help you bring another one along. And if you need to work better with one organization, pick the town, pick the county, pick a volunteer association, pick the church, just pick one to get started with. And then others will want to be part of it slowly, especially when you get to 4 or 5 or 10. Then they want to be part of the momentum.
Because we get really good engagement at our events, and there's a lot of hype and so much appreciation for it, but every year it's the same 10 people. Like, we just can't seem to bring anybody to the meeting or, to the project.
The STPs, the same 10 people. You work on the town or county council, on the economic development authority, sit on the ag study board, volunteer at all the organizations, tie the skates at hockey, run 2 businesses, and put away the chairs in church. It's like, Jesus. There's more people in town that could do, and I know you guys are it. So you've got to build that base slowly. One of the hardest parts, though, to that, and it goes back to we're diverse. If you're going to get people involved, don't just ask them to do things the way you want to do them. We want to be part of something where our brains and our capacity and our creativity are welcome. So make sure you're not saying, hey, would you help me do this the way we've always done it? Don't get me wrong, people are very busy, so don't ask them to come to a meeting either. No, I'm so sick and tired of going to meetings. We all are. It's like, oh, come. But most people will be like, just tell me what to do. Just give me something to do for a couple of hours and I'll volunteer. Or you ask them to come and help come up with some creative ideas. That's what will get them more engaged. When they feel like they can start to have some ownership. Is that help? Yeah.
I was wondering if you can talk more on the lying to ourselves about being community builders. Ours is working on getting out of that, but ours mostly focuses on roping just because that's who we are.
Focuses on what?
Roping.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find things to bring in more like family children nights for people that don't have horses. Because it's so much these days to have a horse and one that can rope. It excludes a ton of people. So do you have any ideas on building like that?
The first thing I would want to know is an assessment of the community of all the different volunteer associations that are also doing other things. What the town puts on?
Very small.
Very small.
Like, they don't have a grocery store.
Right.
I do in the barn.
Do they? Well, okay. We have a
I know
barn
where she's
grocery
from.
store.
Okay. You could, if it's a small community, the very first thing you could do is ask people if they could pick one thing that they'd like to see that's new. And this is why we have volunteer summits and bring people together to ask them, what are you missing from here in your community? Something you would like to see that's.
So I know something Wellington did in the past is they brought in the lawnmower races at the same time as an event with your guys' roping, and I was actually there. But yeah, so you do have a couple very engaged people, like touch base with Tyler, and he's pretty community minded, ex-COVID stuff, but yeah, he'll help you.
Yeah. I was hoping to look at stuff like kid-based, like dummy roping, maybe ground bow tying or something like that, just because like the kids are so far from everything.
Or even, we expanded our bouncy castles
Oh, okay.
for our big event during the summer. It was a bouncy castle, but now we're trying to incorporate that in the summer farmer's market. Because I'm a grandparent, right? But my children are growing up. But when my grandson comes now, I have a different mentality. I want to go with him, do something that he wanted to do. When we were young, it was like we drug our kids to do what we wanted to do. And if the kids want to do it now, the parents are coming. You build it for the kids, the parents will come. That's just the way society is now. I see that more. Because just like one of the other sessions, and I guess we didn't notice it, but when we have our meetings and the parents come, 20 years ago, no kid ever showed up. Now they come, it's just accepted. So it's like,
They don't have babysitters, they need to have,
We want them people around there to get ponies.
Yeah.
And I wanted to sort of bounce off that. I mean, obviously, been a couple of years. We ran a ball tournament, and my kids were little. We had lots of, like, families were coming with kids, and I was like, why don't we do, like, a carnival for the kids, keep them busy and stuff. But it's really neat because over the 5 or 6 years that we did it, when I started it, my kids were like 1 and 2. And they're now hitting that, like 10 and 12 years old. And even when they were like 7 or 8, they were like, well, I'm getting too old for that game over there, but I know how it goes. Can I go run it for a little while? And if I didn't have enough volunteers or you only had one person running it, and the adults were fabulous, like people that I brought in as the actual volunteers to run events, to let the little kids, come over and take a turn helping them run it and teach it. And it just sort of became a not on purpose mentorship, but I just find that a lot of our kids now, when we have a dance or we have something, they're all like, well, can I come help at the ticket table? Or can I get, oh, well, I'll clear some tables. Or, just because they were let try it when they were little enough to still care about being helpful, and it looks like a big person thing to do and you're letting me do it. And I feel like to a degree we've sort of at least cultivated that with our with kids that are just coming to teen years, and hopefully once we get all the events going again, maybe that has lasted for some.
Can I offer up, consider pop-up sports. I don't care what sports they are, they could be roping and stuff. When I did a podcast a few weeks ago with Wetaskiwin and the Indigenous community right next to them. And I asked the chief, I said, can I someday come see a powwow? And he said, of course you can. You can come anytime you want. I was like, well, how do I get invited? He said, you don't need to be invited, you can come. I've never gone, even when I was an MLA, because I wasn't sure if when I pulled on to the area, whether I'd be welcome, if I'd be insulting them, if it was a private ceremony, if it was, right. But I didn't know that, and so I didn't even know if I would insult them if I asked. My wife is Portuguese, and so our kids play soccer. I feel uncomfortable going into a hockey arena, because I'm not a hockey dad, and I don't have that hockey culture. Trust me, soccer's just as flipping crazy. I thought I was going to get the, no practices at 5 in the morning and crazy parents. No, bullshit, they're crazy. but I'm not as comfortable going into an arena. Now, just imagine if you want more people involved, pop-up sports we always recommend them. So lots of kids, their parents can't afford, especially if they're new to your community, or they didn't play it before, they can't afford it, they don't know what the expectations of the criteria are, and so they're not going to register to play soccer or to play hockey or to go to roping because they have no idea what they're signing up for, or if they're even going to be welcome because they're not part of that smaller community group. Pop-up sports, we keep advising that to communities, and everywhere we've been advising it all over North America, they're having huge success because, especially with new families that are new to the community, no sign-up fee, and you knock on their door and say, look, this Saturday we're having free hot dogs and there's no obligation, we're going to play soccer from 2 to 5. You can meet some people in the community and come and hang out. Hot dogs, you don't have to play soccer. We'll also have some other stuff to get them out. And then they build up trust, they build up relationships, they get to know people, and then they might sign up for organized sports. But our communities are so, I tell this to people all the time, is your community welcoming? And half the room, when I ask, everywhere I go, 500 people in the audience, Half the room puts up their hand and says, yes. The other half doesn't. I look at the other half and say, that's embarrassing. And I look at the other half who have their hands up and I say, you're lying. Because we're friendly. I mean, we wave at someone on the street because we think there's somebody else. It's like, I don't know who that person was, but we wave anyway. They stop and ask us how to get to a restaurant or where to find the bank. We tell them. We're not mean. We're not chasing them out of town with baseball bats. But welcoming means going and getting them and saying, come and join us. Breaking down some of those walls and barriers. So my advice is, find out what they need, but start with some pop-up sports that really, there isn't the long-term obligation. And you'll get some cross-pollination of those communities. In one, sorry, I don't have way too many stories, but in one, they said that they were struggling, it was Ontario, they were struggling to get the community really to break down some of those walls. And we were working on a strategic plan for them, so they were building a community garden, because they had a large migrant population, and a lot of seniors that wanted to use it. And they also wanted a dog park. So they were putting them at different locations, and my advice was put them side by side. And they said, oh, I don't know that that's a good idea. And they did. And they found out that there was all this brand new cross-pollination because people who were working in the garden got to know each other better, seniors and new migrants. And they would say, what kind of dog is that? And the people with dogs would come over and say, what are you growing? And boom, oh wait, you also have kids that are in elementary school, or you also, they found common ground. You got to break down those typical walls that we haven't built them to keep people out. It's just become such a club that people are scared to knock on the door.
No. There are clubs where you can't get anybody in.
What's that?
I said, no, there are clubs where you can't get anybody in. You're not welcome. You just have to kick the door in and keep going.
Yeah, I just walk right in and make myself at home. They didn't like it, they can leave.
I actually think most clubs are happy to have you show up. It's just, I think what happens is people get into a rut. And sometimes, you know, you will, when you see someone, you'll say, oh, you're thinking like they're in 4-H or whatever. So you do that, but maybe we don't do it enough, is what
I think something that our club has really been working hard on is making sure, like we have an agenda and we have goals and we have things we need to get done, but we gotta also at every single one of those make sure there's the fun. What's the fun of all this? Like, let's get our stuff done, but we need to have the fun aspect. Now, whether that's just beer at the end of the meeting, we, you know, or we end up meeting at a girlfriend's place, or you know what I mean, whatever. I think incorporating the fun so that makes it, oh my God, I look forward to seeing you the next time, or the next project, or whatever. So we really work hard on that. Like, we have some hiccups, of course, obviously, but
yeah. There's all sorts of things you can do. We always, when we get municipal councils and administration together, the first thing we do at a retreat or the session is 2 truths and a lie. Never heard of that? Everybody has to spend 5 minutes and come up with 2 things about them that are true that most people in the room won't know about, and 1 thing that's a lie. You know how fun that is to be like, wait a second, which? You know, you get stuff like, well, I smoked a lot of dope in the 60s, I ran naked through Dodger Stadium, and I like to ride horseback bear naked. It's like, what? One of those is not true. Bullying, are you sure it's just one? So there's, like, those are fun exercises to get to know each other better, especially newcomers, so they can get to know you. One other, in fact, I just wanted to pick up, I totally get what you mean. Icebreakers, yeah. I totally get what you mean when you say that most of the associations are welcoming. That's not the issue. Remember, it's not what you are thinking, it's what they're thinking that's important. And so you may be very welcoming, but they don't know that unless you go get them. Right?
I agree. You have to invite people. They won't come unless you invite them.
Yeah. Well, and then one other bit of advice, 7 times. There's a psychological rule of 7 times. You have to tell someone 7 times before they start to believe it. And believe it or not, if you tell them 7 times, then they start to believe it even though nothing changed. And research has been done on this. If you go to work, at 9 o'clock you hear a rumor, and you're like, there's no way that that's true, that's impossible. Then you hear it again at 10 o'clock, you're like, huh. Then you hear it again at noon, then you hear it again at 1, then at a coffee break at 2:30, then at 5 o'clock you come home and your spouse tells it to you. 7 times, you're like, huh, maybe there's some truth to that. Nothing changed except that you heard it 7 times. That's why politicians repeat themselves way too much. They do. They know that. This is a psychological rule. And I can confirm. I mean, I have to tell my sons to take the garbage out 7 times before they believe me. 7 times, it's like, oh, you meant it.
You didn't have to tell me, I heard you the first
Okay,
time.
sorry, we had a couple questions, so, yes. Renee.
I think too, the most challenging statements out there that kind of grind on you a little bit is we should not make money and we deserve support. Because you're kind of told you shouldn't make money, but you need that money to come in to run your business, right? So you think you deserve the support because you're not supposed to.
Right, and they go hand in hand, and they become
It's
this
been for many years.
self-propagating loop. Until the government goes, hey, our deficit's $3 billion, your funding is cut, figure it out. And one day it will happen.
And a lot of them won't.
What's that?
And a lot of ag societies will not fold.
Yeah.
Just because they can't afford the overhead. It's just a hard truth.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what my question is. So if you're giving grant money, like you're not going to say no because you know we have to be sustainable. So if you're giving grant money, how can you use it and what to watch for that you can be sustainable? You know what I mean? Like I know, like don't rely on it too much, but use it well so that you are sustainable.
Yeah, so the key is to always find out ways to turn it into new revenue generating streams that can replace if you don't get the grant and the grant gets taken away. I mean, that should be the goal for, the province has countless programs. I mean, the Regional Economic Development Alliances were funded for 3 years, everyone got together and then they said, no more funding, you should be sustainable now, figure out how to do it. And then a bunch of them folded and other ones carried on. In fact, I mean, maybe this is my own philosophical bent, but the best thing the government could do is give you the seed money to find out a way that you can turn it into sustainability yourself. Because otherwise, no offense, but otherwise, what's the difference between that and welfare?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, every single rural Albertan that's a concern, it's like, oh, you should earn what you get. But how can we turn around that with that mindset that, hey, we deserve it? Everyone thinks they deserve it. There are not enough hands to hand out the money that for what people are reaching for.
You know, you can think that we were doing really well. Our building is rented all the time and everything. And then COVID came, so all of a sudden, guess what? No weddings, we did have a few funerals, but we had to change. So what we did is we tried to make sure that we could have people come in if they were double vaccinated, so we have food. So we tried wrestling matches. So we're constantly trying new things. We know we need the money to keep the building going, which is sad because, like you said, keep the damn building going.
Right. But, I mean, I'm not meaning that it's bad that you have a building.
Okay.
Too many organizations have got down to everything's about saving that building and missing the services and the celebration of agriculture in the community building. So don't let it drag you down like an anchor, that's some cost. So, but this is the most magnificent time to be in your position. Every single person out there is sick and tired of looking at a computer screen. I mean, look, I love my wife and my kids, but I'm going to kill them if I don't get out of the house more often, right? I mean, you can love someone, but you need some space. And so everyone is desperately craving socialization. I've seen countless communities right now that are preparing for when everyone comes back who graduated from high school.
Graduation.
Yeah, the reunions, yes, sorry. I'm going to be 50.
Been that long for you?
I know. I'm going to be 50 in a few months. I think I'm losing some. Yeah, I know. So everyone that I'm talking to, they're like, oh yes, we're going to have a reunion and bring everybody back. It's going to be really exciting. We're going to have a lot of community events. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Except when they tell me what they're doing, they're attracting everybody home, having a dance where everyone get drunk and then go home after, right? Why isn't anyone doing an act? Like we talk about, you've heard me speak before that everyone says, how do we keep young people in our community? Don't do that. Let them go, but give them a reason to come home after they're done exploring and bringing all those new ideas with them. Well, here you are at a reunion with all these people coming back, and I have yet to find a single community at the reunion that is talking about the vacancies, the new businesses they need, the affordability of their housing, the quality of their schools. It's like running in a political campaign and never asking for a vote. You're not going to get any. But when you've got hundreds, maybe 1,000 people coming home for a reunion, why wouldn't your first marketing campaign be to those people to say, hey, did you know you can come back home? We've got opportunities. And it's the same with every other, all these people wanting socialization, they're desperate to get out of town and go to events. I mean, you're going to see in the presentation tonight, there are people who are moving out of Los Angeles and San Francisco and New York, but they're also moving out of Calgary and Edmonton and Toronto. They're moving to places like Innisfail and to Moose Jaw. Pardon? Wetaskiwin, exactly. Yes, we've seen our populations grow, but they just need to know we're there, and we need to make sure we're welcoming so that when they do show up, they know that this is the place they want to be. That's why communities like Zionsville, Indiana, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Des Moines, Iowa is now one of the most expensive places in the U.S. to live because so many people move there, they can't build housing fast enough. Like there are small, medium, and medium-large cities even that are experiencing a boom. We got to quit hiding the fact that we're wonderful communities in rural Alberta. We need to celebrate that. It's a perfect time.
That's good.
Is that time? Quarter after? What time was it supposed to end? I don't want to get in trouble with you. Okay, do any of you have any last questions? Because I have one more story I want to share with you if you don't know where to go. Yeah.
You talk about welcoming people in the organizations and stuff, but the first thing out of the mouth is, yeah, but I'm not going to join your executive. You know, like, okay, well,
Not
you kind of
today.
need people to
That might change in time when they get more comfortable.
It's just so frustrating. Like, okay, yeah, no, lots of people help, but they don't, okay, nobody wants to be the executive. Like, oh, who's going to take my job? Who's going to take my spot?
And I get that. That's why you need succession planning. But start with just getting them help for 1 hour with one particular thing. Then spend some time picking their ideas. You've got to treat it like dating. You don't walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, would you like to get married and have kids?" You gotta roll something. I mean, I've heard it has happened on occasion.
It's not really got behind you. You could have a $500,000 motor open.
Yeah,
But a $300,000 boat, I'm sure somebody's jumping.
What's that app? There was a dating app, and the guy just posted a picture of his bank account with like $700,000. Like, you have no self-esteem. Just money. So spend some time. It takes time. We'll start with one and build it up from there. Okay. All right, last story. This is about communication because I think this is one of the biggest challenges we have is around communication. So this, you can write this down if you want. You can email me and I'll tell you. It's 4 letters. PCOS. Okay? Now, this is my communication strategy. The P stands for problem, and the S stands for solution. Now, I came up with this because when we were in provincial politics, we would work on a problem for 1.5 years and then come up with a solution that we'd announce and people would be mad. And I was always like, it's a great idea. Why are you so mad? Because most of the time we forgot to tell people there was a problem we were trying to fix. And so all they saw was change coming and it made them mad. Okay? So you've got to first start with the problem. And so when you're talking to people in your community, you've got to get agreement on what the problem is. And not telling them, talk to them to find out what they think the problem is and find common ground. I mean, when you're talking about the future of your community, if you start to talk about solutions, one person might think the solution is there aren't enough young people. Someone else might say there's not enough housing. Someone else might say there's not enough businesses on Main Street. Someone else might say we have an unwelcoming culture. Until you figure out what the problem is, the solutions are going, then you're going to be arguing about the solution because you haven't even agreed on the problem. So first, articulate and agree on the problem. And it takes time to ask questions about that. Then, when you agree on what the problem is, or at least what one of the problems is, talk to people you want to get involved about the challenges, that's what the C stands for, the challenges in their life because of the problem. Right? The problem exists that we don't have enough businesses on Main Street. Lots of people will be like, yeah, I don't care, it doesn't bother me. And then you ask them, really? So you don't go out of town to shop? Well, yeah, I go out of town to shop. I have to go out of town because I can't get some of the stuff I need. Well, what happens when it's bad weather? Well, then that's a challenge, especially when I have to get my medication. And they'll start to tell you the challenges created by the problem in their life. And then they'll be like, wait a second, this isn't something I can just go, who cares? This is important. Then you talk about the opportunities created, that's what the O is, for them if the problem goes away. Think about all the opportunities. Hey, you know what? If we get some new businesses on Main Street, you don't have to leave so much. How would that help you? Well, I don't know. It won't help me any. I'll get a few more things. I won't have to leave town, but that's all. But wait a second. Those businesses will pay taxes and your house price might go up as more people move to the community because of the more businesses, which means your house price won't devalue and your taxes won't keep going up. Oh yeah, that's a great thing. And then suddenly, hey, then the solution comes along. If you take them through the problem, the challenges, and the opportunities, most of the time they will say, here's the solution, here's what we need to do, or at least say, I want to help, before you ever offer the solution. And now you've got a willing partner instead of somebody you're trying to convince to do something. And it works. It works. I promise you it works. Use the power for good though. I use this to get a new vehicle. See, when I resigned from politics, I had a Ford F-150 with 250,000 kilometers on it. The drive passenger side seat, the heat seat didn't work, the gas kept falling off, no matter how many times I fixed it. The steering wheel even, there's a copper wire in the model I had, and that 1,000 times of doing this, and it broke. So the vehicle wouldn't start unless you tilted the steering wheel down, because then the cables would touch. I'm like, $1,800 to fix the stupid thing. It was ridiculous. And then it needed new tires, and the paint was chipping, and it was rusting. And so I said to my wife when I resigned from politics, I think I need to get a new vehicle, and I want to get a Jeep. And she said, no, you'll want a truck. It's like, oh, okay. So I thought, let's start from square one. The problem, we need a new vehicle. Honey, the problem is that when I'm gone on the road and I'm always traveling and you're taking the kids somewhere 40 below, it's dangerous, the truck might quit. What if that cable breaks and it won't even run, something else goes wrong? She's like, I agree, we need to get a new vehicle. Great, share the problem, we established that. I said, okay, now you said I should get a truck. She said, yes, I think you'll want a truck. I'm like, okay, I'd be happy to get a truck. Well, wait, you go down to take the kids to the dentist and you have a tough time parking it. And then she's like, yeah, that's a challenge. I have a tough time parking, and that stupid thing is too big to sit in the garage, so we have to park it outside all winter long. And yeah, and then it's just trying to get the kids in, and it's lumbersome because of the doors, like they're little. And so she started to go through all these challenges created. All I had to do was ask a couple of questions. And then I said, oh, just imagine if we got something that satisfied all your needs. Like, think about it. She was like, yeah, I still want a four-wheel drive. It would be nice to have something that I could park in the garage, and it would be easier to park downtown, and I'd take the kids to the dentist, and we could get all the modern stuff with the Bluetooth that connects to my phone, and then I could listen to music, and whoo, she went off on opportunities. We're driving down Highway 16, going by Sherwood Park, and she looks over and she goes, huh, honey, I think you should get a Jeep. Because they're like, I was like, that's a great idea. Yeah. Oh yeah, no. You know what? I apologized to her and said, this is what I did. And she said, I know, I've been doing this to you for years. Yeah. And you know what? It's true, because I said, when did you ever do this to me? I'm not gullible. And she said, yeah. Remember how?
Look at the wallpaper,
Yeah.
the new floor, the furniture.
Oh, a new house. No, when we were getting married, we were going to move into a new house, and her parents lived with her sister, and her sister was moving to Calgary. So she said, you remember all that, right? Right? We lived out in Hardisty, and so my parents spent 6 months a year in Portugal, and then my sister was moving to Calgary, so they had no place to live, so they were going to buy a little house, and I pointed out they're gone for 6 months, all winter long. You have to go shovel the snow, you have to go make sure the sidewalk is shoveled like every day, because otherwise you get ticketed by the city, and you got to make sure that the heater's working and the windows aren't. Went through all the stuff, and I'm like, the problem was that they were going to buy this house, and it was going to create work, and it was going to create challenges for me with all that extra work. And then she said, just think if we could come up with something that would be an opportunity that would be advantageous. Like if they lived closer, we have built-in babysitters. They can come and shovel our snow once in a while instead of you always shoveling theirs. If they could be closer. Months went by, she kept asking questions, I kept offering ideas, and then one day I said to her, maybe your parents should live with us. It was my idea.
That took 7 times.
I know. And they do. They live with us 6 months of the year for the last 17 years. So, I mean it. Use this power for good. If you guys, tonight I'm going to talk about the challenges and the changes and what's coming and what our communities can take advantage of. It's a fun presentation. I like doing it. It's a little bit shocking, but it's energetic. And of course, I'm always energetic. And if you ever have any questions, I have some business cards here. You can always email me, ask me, or text me. Don't call. I'm always busy in a meeting, so send a text. And I'll be around here this afternoon doing some work if you want to chat. But otherwise, thank you for having me this afternoon. Sure.
I'd like to, well, we have to. Yeah, but really, really good. Session this morning. Tyler is not. Tyler and those people really do.
Yeah, I always encourage multiple.
And she's also connected with FCSS, that's
Because
right.
half the time when I talk about collaboration, it's folks can have it with
And so like,
If you have any questions, you send me a note.
so much expense time going out and literally meeting and interviewing all the people in our.
So you were talking about the board. She went about it a little bit. I
So I just because I saw one other girl that works very great and especially when there's workers has zero chance I read your book.
And that too, yeah, like.
No, I don't have any books here. I wasn't sure.
That was a focus.
Yes. You just go on the website and you can order them, or you can send me an email, and I would send out a bunch for free too. So.
I got it from an author. Well, we hear about it in colleges around. So he gave me your book, but if I could get that sent, I would love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we can talk about all the different, I'm trying to craft whatever we're doing to make sure it's most effective for you guys. First thing I recognize is that you guys can say the same thing I do, but you're a little, someone outside is like, well, now I'm.
And you were like they're almost 4 years here in May, and brand new elect this year, so I get a lot of from the older people in my community is, who do you think you are? You're not from here, why are you running? Because you have 4 legacy families in this community that have done the same, and you're stagnant and you're dying. I have a fresh new perspective that maybe you should listen to as I'm here for the community. But I don't approach them that way, I just show them, I show up for events, plan events, myself and another new person, who's an older gentleman, but Bob Richardson, well, that's a lot of fundraiser, another fundraiser for the library, we're just working around council and building a community that way, and the other 3, you know, we try to bring them along by giving the mayor photo ops, because he will definitely show up for those, and give him the kudos, but then still drags his feet and so and like working, like, okay, so we'll just find a new way around it, we'll do it this way, and we'll do community committees that are outside of council altogether, and we'll just build a community with ours. And that's all we're doing right now.
Inoculate the others.
Yeah, and we're building a following of people who quite love and appreciate us, but we're still fighting with them, trying not to allow them, and 3 of them have a majority. They're sinking us fast, and I understand that these are a marathon, not a sprint, but it's just like, I don't want to fail on the sinking ship, because those
still goes together, it's nothing for
But
all of us to
how do
have
you
in
get
the same
stop?
space.
But I do agree that there is.
Yeah.
Yes.
You drop me a note, I'll
I
get you
did,
some
can I
books.
give you my card as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a way, so it's like, this is pretty, thanks.
I really enjoyed your session, I was so happy to see you actually, I was like, oh, I'm taking that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Because what do you guys usually, what's your big?
Oh, yeah. It's been a long time. How are you doing? Good. Yeah?
Okay, is that
What's
the-
common tournament?
Oh,
Yeah. One of the STPs, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I volunteered for 5 days.
Oh, but my son put on 3.
okay, my husband went to the 3-on-3 one.
Okay.
They loved it.
No.
And that's why I want.
Yeah, that was just before they shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very great, but Memorial.
Okay, I think that's all
When you're from the community, we don't want to miss someone that's there, it helps down and
So we're
outside.
just that big.
Yeah, like I
Well,
just
yeah,
moved here
you're-
a couple of years ago. I was sick.
Yeah.
And so what's your last name?
Coon.
Oh,
Is it, okay, I was gonna ask, what inspired you?
yes.
Well, I've done retail for 18 years.
Yeah.
And now I live there.
And even so, like, for me with my dogs, I just want to get them out doing something because they drive me mad. I have 2 healers.
Yeah, but I mean-
Even if I never put it to use, doesn't matter. It's something to get them out. Mine is
The dogs felt like that. It's hot and.
Yeah, I know, it's that way everywhere. I really wish I could work myself out of a job, but I'm busier than ever.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. How can we get them to come here? Session like this was that. And then change.
So it's cold.
From the inside out.
Yeah, you and Nicole will talk about it, because I also always recommend other organizations too, if that's possible.
Cities, you come in,
Yeah.
like, you know, they don't have certificate of trust, you don't change.
That's what the presentation tonight's all
Well,
about.
I
After
think
that.
like-
Yeah, I know. The whole tank study, older than the
Yeah.
province. Done.
Now, the city is small, and you get, your city, you should
And the
take
memorial,
that
the
out.
first one,
You just skipped it.
Yeah, I know.
And then it's just,
Well,
just
especially
that far away
like,
from.
I kind
But
of
the
wish
same
there was more
They want to keep the exercise and go fast.
So the one that I went to
Take
this
it as control
morning,
of money. I'm trying to.
it was really good. One guy had said
Really keep
that
that.
in Vermilion, they had some like
Outsiders.
No, I know, that's where I'm like, it's a club. It's
Yeah.
not a-
See, it's kind of funny, because I'm here for highways.
nice to
In the
know.
winter, I'm in Lincoln.
I would have gone to Vermilion for that.
Yeah.
All right. So then I look at both sides. But I don't do it. I've been that way all my life.
And you were.
And it's kind of funny, I have to run to Wendy, because I find Wendy's in Silver Lake.
Yeah.
I need to get down there. She works in some store or something.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Sorry, wait, Wendy,
And
my
I
bad.
know it's.
So I will not.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad is her brother and sister.
Oh, that's how, okay.
Yeah, my dad passed away this last year.
Yeah.
And Wendy actually lives down in,
Oh.
yeah, Christy, her daughter.
Yeah.
And the guy was here working, and then they decided when they got married and she got pregnant,
Yeah.
to go back there, so Wendy would,
Okay, and then where's she?
she lives in, Florida.
Oh.
Yeah, because Carrie, her daughter, yeah, married a guy from New York, and then he's a detective now down in Florida, and so she lived there.
Oh, okay.
And everybody's everywhere now, we're global.
Okay, it's good to see you again.
This was like
So how long do you think the grant money is going to
4
last?
years ago. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Well, my daughter's.
Is there an unwritten rule within government that it's going to keep?
Nope.
Yeah,
No.
no, it's.
I mean, there, when I was in politics,
That was 15, right?
yeah, 2002 to 2015. It was, rural Alberta was our base.
Great.
Yeah, and it was, then the New Democrats came along, they were,
They weren't there long enough to switch
I
it.
used to rain, so
They
I
were on
went
the
over to
top.
the barrel wall.
yeah, they were.
Because there's
And
something I can
then
go to within
Jason
an hour.
Kennedy came along, and I
And
don't.
yeah, people don't.
No, Because they've downloaded all the
Demonstration is friendly.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
They still appreciate how
Yeah.
valuable the rural work is.
I think,
But I think Jason Kenny's got such an ideological bent instead of a community focus. He does things for the sake of ideology instead of whether or not they're good.
I think the money that's invested out of the government in.
Well, yeah, I'll send you an email and then you can connect some more.
I think it's a good investment. I don't know, like, I'm a little bit biased because I'm on an ag society.
I personally don't think it's right. I still really like, Peter Logging has one of my favorite quotes ever, when he said, in 20 years, this province should be like 1 million, or just over 1 million people in Edmonton, 1 million people in Calgary, and 3 million people around the rest of the world.
He's bang on, yes.
And here we are at, and that's not the case. And if he looked at it today, he would say that this is hurting this province, its longevity, by not investing in rural enough.
Yeah.
It's the same issue in our federal government, doesn't invest in the north, and the Russians are running submarines through it now. Like we're going to get what we deserve because we're not diversifying.
Right.
Yeah, and we need to do that. So I don't think we invest enough in the infrastructure required. I pitched this to the government when I was still in MLA, and no one took me up on it. But I'm going to do it if I raise enough money from the private sector to go do this. I was in writing the rural development strategy, and I was in Slave Lake, and I met a couple who had 2 young girls talking about community building. And he told me the whole story, he said they got a letter from the school saying, don't let your kids come play in the playground, we're changing all the pea gravel up. And I said, okay. He said, I didn't think anything of it. A couple months later, I'm talking to the principal, and I asked, what was that about? He said, oh, we found drug needles in pea gravel, you have to take it all out. Take it all out and put it back. And he said, that's when I looked at my wife and said, we're getting it. They were from North Edmonton their whole lives, and I'm like, we got to do something. So they moved. But the interesting part of the story is when he said, it took me 1.5 years to find Slave Lake. And I asked him what that meant. He said, well,
Like he's going through a list of criteria.
yeah, exactly. And that's what he said. Like, we only had so much to spend on the house. We both needed different types of jobs. We wanted the girls to have piano lessons. And so he went through it, and it took him a long time to find it. And I thought, at that moment, instantly, what we need is a dating app where communities put in all their assets and people go put in what they're looking for, and then you can go, it could be people from around the world, people from across Canada, people from anywhere that could punch it in and say,
Here's what we have to offer.
Right. And it would help. And you know what? It would encourage communities to say, hey, we need to add some more stuff to this list.
Yeah, look at our list. Look what our list looks like to look at, for instance, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm still going to do it one way or another one of these days. But I just think it would be amazing. My last campaign, I went and helped an MLA in Calgary, and we went up to the house to knock on the door, and I looked at it because we've been in the neighborhood. I'm like, so this is going to be a couple that are just under 65 years old. They are just about to retire.
Your profile.
Exactly. Their kids don't live here anymore. The community's too big. It's grown up around them. They don't know what they're like. And they answered the door, and I asked them questions. The golf course is too expensive. I don't even know this community anymore. My kids are elsewhere around Canada. And I gave them my card, and I said, I never even talked about voting. I just said, call me. We're going to talk about communities you could live in. They want to move to Brooks. And they called and said, we took $700,000 out of our house, and we can walk on the golf course anytime we want. This is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, they bought that Corolla house and the place before them.
Better, because they got more room for the grandkids and a bigger backyard. I bet there's 100,000 people in Calgary, all with the same idea and have no idea where to go.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the boat, like the ships here, guys got to jump on while they can.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, COVID's forced people out of their
I know, and they're desperately looking for communities. This is
Yeah.
a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I don't talk too
No,
much.
that's good.
I thought you were monopolizing this.
No, he was just listening in.
But the app is, millennials, Generation X, or whatever, that's how they travel. It's, here's the list of what I want. Here's the app. It's not, let's just go to Mexico, right?
Right.
Let's not just go to this, I want this and this and this in my travel. And here's the place that you have to go.
And see, Pinoca's a small community. We haven't grown in 20 years, 25 years probably. The hospital's there. Everyone that works in the hospital at the high end, they all live somewhere else. And like the old arena was one that was supposed to go somewhere else, they got on a dime, like half price to build. And when Rick was mayor, they tried to get funding together to build a collision complex. And they just couldn't spend it. But like partnering with other people within the community. You know, that's kind of been the theme throughout some of these things, collaboration, and trying to pool your resources.
The average community, what was the stat? I don't remember the size. It was like over 1,500 people or something. The average community has 4 buses to move seniors around for 4 different organizations, and none of them are used more than 1 day a week. Most of them are used once.
So
all that capital investment, yet we still can't get a ride to go where we're going.
Yeah.
And those are the same folks that would say, well, how come we can't use the school gym in the evening? It's only for the school.
Yeah.
How come but you insist on keeping your bus only for your people, right?
Yeah.
Let's break down some of those balls.
Yeah, I think, you're right. Instead of letting duplicating.
Northbridge, with some of these older generation in these smaller communities, we don't want younger people here. We don't want younger people here.
Yeah.
They're afraid they're going to upset their community, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they don't realize it's going to enhance your community.
Yeah.
A real good one is years ago, when the cameras, the city of cameras, when the west end of Cameron started to build, the downtown people were just petrified.
Because of
They
the
thought they're
young
going to
people
close their
moving
doors.
in?
Well, the more people moving in, more business up there, they're going to take away.
Oh, from downtown?
I know some of the people down there, because we used to go there by the Plaza Road there.
Yeah.
They flourished. They're better now than they were before.
Yeah, you know why that is? You know why that is? Because they specifically focused on when people came in, getting them downtown, reminding them about the downtown. So instead of stealing from them, they doubled the number of people coming to Camrose, so they doubled the number of people downtown.
Exactly.
Became more profitable.
And Camrose was known as a retirement city.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I know the people, because I know Duff ladies and all my guys for years, because we used to do lots of volunteering and,
Yeah.
and they thought they were gonna die. And meanwhile, to this day, they're still, all them businesses are still there. Maybe not going to be closed because they've had enough or whatever.
Yeah.
But,
There'll always be something closing, right? And
oh yeah, no matter how big or small.
So that's your job now, Doug, is going around and to municipalities?
Yeah, I chambers of commerce and municipalities and
Finding solutions or suggesting solutions?
yeah, some of them want a week of work analyzing the community and giving them suggestions. Some of them want 6 months of work, like do an economic analysis, take us through a strategic plan, help us do the marketing and tell us where to sell our product and who, the first one to go get the whole plan. Some of them just want a day session to do some strategy building. Everybody's different, so.
You've never been to Pinoca, have you?
No.
There's lots of places probably.
No,
and
but
there's
I
so much
mean,
help and
like I'm just getting in, I haven't been to the east side very long, but it needs an injection.
Yeah.
Lacombe is doing good, but Lacombe has always done a little bit better.
Yeah, Pinoca's always been one of those communities. Why isn't it doing it better? Everything's at its fingertips. It's got so much potential.
It's so easy,
Yeah.
it's the playground, pissy match. I own this, I do this, and you do this, and you do that.
Stay in your lane.
And
Yeah.
don't, it's an
Lacombe-
easy thing,
Yeah,
but it's coming around.
Yeah, I think a little bit better because they changed mayors, because the mayor they had there, had the attitude, this is the way things have to be.
Yeah,
It's new
Rick
and
tried, but he got frustrated, now he's left again.
And
Kevin's gonna be a little bit better.
Black Falls was, well, if you,
Black
it's
Falls
like when you really go to
is
Black Falls. So Black Falls was getting, and all of a sudden, Holmes said, holy shit, we gotta change.
Better
this."
keep up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right now, look what they're doing, both ends of town are going.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully they can make it go.
And Black Falls, I mean, like, junior A hockey, brand new arena.
God, yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of personal investment within that city,
huge.
but still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
This-
the dropping of funds is just very forefront in the AAAS society because, there's been a vote about whether or not, the building and the society needs as much money as they're getting from the county and stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
We're always so desperately trying to cling on to the funds for next year. It's hard to plan for the future, but if we don't plan for the future, right?
The hammer's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you tonight.
Yeah, you bet.
thanks.
I said, you ain't got more cars. I'm gonna go down to the Chamber of Commerce next. Well, no, I'm busy next week, but I'm gonna go down to the Chamber of Commerce and drop a couple cars off the right.
Oh, sure.
I think get them involved. Things are really changing. They're gonna crash. And I comment, that's where there's some, oh, we're just non-profit. We don't know. Run your organization. That's all I gotta say. You're talking to us back home, back up and run. Like, for instance, the junior, they have $7,000 in the hole. So the only said, would you step forward and help us out? So I took it over. By the time I got done that year, I had that $7,000 paid off and $5,000 to the good for the next year. When we had a meeting, they said, how would you do that? Change your perspective and treat it as a business and you'll make money. And you need the money.
You have to.
Same with the city, like, here's what died on. It was nothing.
Yeah.
And finally I stepped on, I said, you know, we gotta get this thing going because all the old people quit.
Yeah.
Guess what? I took it from nothing. It was costing the town money to operate. They make nothing but money now. I built a little pool out there, didn't take a penny out of the town. The town was pissed because they didn't ask anybody, but I went outside, not outside towns, but okay, just for instance, like the fertilizer. Bruce Dole had the fertilizer. I said, you guys, millions of dollars the farmers are spending to that fertilizer company, not to Bruce. Bruce is making millions, but the fertilizer company's making more. Why are you not going to them?
Yeah.
I went to Bruce and Sylvia and I said, do you think they would, they gave us $5,000. That's where I went out and got the money. And they said, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And now they just flourish.
You just need to ask.
And that's what I'm trying to tell the Westerner. That, oh, no, we're non-profit. We can't make any money. They have junk piled up that they should be selling. You gotta say, no, we can't sell it. Okay, well, I just heard the other day, yeah, we can't sell it. I'm trying to tell them that. I need, like I said, I can't get on the board, but I need somebody from the outside to come in and say, look at you guys. You really need to change your aspect of what's going on here.
Yeah.
Or you're going to really crash.
Yeah.
You know, they built that new great big building. They wrote before they built it. Now the city bailed it out. If the city, if they don't be careful, they're going to
Be factory, I know.
Yeah. And once you lose it, I don't think the city will ever go. Well, the city said they can't afford to let it go, but how much can they afford to keep dumping in it?
Right.
If nobody's going to change.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It'll be a bottomless pit forever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a potential in it. It's where I see.
I know.
You know, I'm a little bit different. I've run business for 32 years, a few of them, and they've all made money, other than one. But I can see from the outside, I look at both sides, because I've been on both sides.
Yeah.
And it's like, people, and what you did today is exactly 100% right there.
Great. Just give me a call and we'll chat about it.
Good night. go do the work, but that's what my role is on the ag society, right? That's why they like me.